go ahead and get started with modeling our coat hook. As you can see, here's the finished design just to give you an idea of what it's going to look like when we're all done. And here's actually a picture of the design that I went ahead and 3D printed and attached to my wall using a couple screws. And as you can see, I'm hanging my jacket from it. So back to Fusion, we'll start with a new design by going to File, New Design, and the first thing we will do is we'll save it. So click on the save icon and we'll give it a name of Coat Hook. And we'll throw it right into the same projects folder that we created called Tutorial Designs. So go ahead and click Save. We'll start the same way as we did the last design by creating a sketch, and so go to Sketch, Create Sketch, and we'll choose the XY plane. So if you went ahead and updated your grid and snap settings as we did in the previous lesson, we should be able to zoom in and be roughly in the same scale. If you didn't do that, go ahead and do that now by clicking on your grid settings and make sure you select Fixed Radial button and give it a major grid spacing of 10 and a minor subdivision of 1. Click OK. So zoom in so that you have about 4 squares below and about 5 above. And we're going to start off with a line. So we'll go to Sketch, Line, and we're going to start sketching at an area roughly up here. Don't worry so much about getting the exact same sketch that I have. Just try to roughly match the shape, and then later we're going to go ahead and add some constraints and dimensions to get it to be exactly where we want it. So we're going to start here by implementing the click and release approach to drawing. So left click the mouse button and release, and so that you have this sort of rubber band effect when you move your mouse. And next hover over the origin here, and you can see it will turn blue. We get a little blue square above it, and then start to drag up, and you can see you get this sort of blue dashed line showing you that you are vertical and right in line with that origin mark. So go ahead and click for your second line, and your third line will click right at the origin. The fourth line we're going to come in at an angle, and for our final line or our final click, we're going to come up so that we make a V shape. And then go ahead and click on the little check mark. Next, we'll set some constraints. So as you remember, here's our sketch palette, and we're going to go into our constraints. And the constraint we're going to use this time is going to be the parallel constraint. So you see these two lines, we're going to go ahead and click on that. And to set the parallel constraint, we're going to go ahead and click on the two lines that we want to be parallel to each other. So I want this line to be parallel with this line. So I'm going to click here and then click here. And you can see that they both now are the same angle. So when we have the little parallel constraint showing us that that constraint has been set. So next we're going to go ahead and enter some dimensions. So we'll go to Sketch, Sketch Dimensions, and we'll click on the line, release on this particular line, drag out, and then click again, and we're going to enter a sketch dimension of 35 millimeters and hit enter. We'll do the same thing for this line. We're going to come out, we're going to make this 20 millimeters, and we'll also enter dimension for this line. Now I want this line to be the same dimension as this line here, the 20 millimeters, so instead of entering it in, all I have to do is actually just click on this dimension and it'll automatically reference it. It says D2 because this was the second dimension that I made. So I'll click enter, and I will do the exact same thing with this line here. I'm going to click on it, drag out, and I'm going to have that reference this dimension as well. So there goes all our dimensions. Next we're going to set some angle dimensions. So I'm going to set this angle between this line and this line. So we'll click here and then click here on this line, and we'll get an angle showing us it's 123.8 degrees. We're going to make that 150 degrees. And now pay attention to this line, because remember we made them parallel to each other. So once I set this at 150 and I hit enter, they will both now snap to that angle. And I'm going to do the same thing with this angle and this this line and this line here, and we can see it's at 149 degrees. I'm going to have it reference this angle and make that 150. So now we have dimensions and angles and everything. So next we are going to now create an offset. So I'm going to go to Sketch, go down to Offset, and I'm going to select on this line that we created. Notice that the whole chain is selected. If I didn't want to offset that entire line, I can go and uncheck chain selection, and now it will only highlight this segment, the individual segments. But I do want the entire chain selected, so I'm going to click on chain selection and click on any part of that line. And I can drag this out or in. I know I want it to be in, and it's giving me a negative value. So I want it to be a 5mm offset, so I'm going to enter -5. Let's highlight this. -5 and hit enter. Okay, next I want to close these off. So I'm going to hit L for line and connect these two and also these 2 points. Okay, now I have a closed profile. So that tells me I have something that I can now go ahead and extrude. Before I extrude it, actually, I'm going to go ahead and create some fillets. So actually, before we do that, let's go ahead and move these in so they're not kind of in the way of our sketch. So before we created fillets in the model environment, we can also create fillets in the sketch environment. So if we go to Sketch, Fillet, and all we have to do is click the 2 lines we want to fillet. So I'm going to click this line, and I start to get this fillet that I can drag in up or down. I want this to be about 5mm, so I'm going to hit 5 and enter. And I'm going to right click and choose Repeat Fillet and do the same thing with the bottom of the V. And I'm going to make this one, let's give this a 7 fillet. Okay, that looks good. So now I am going to click on Stop Sketch, and we're going to take this and extrude it. So I'm going to hit E, the shortcut for extrude, or I can go and choose Create, Extrude, and click on that profile, and I will drag this out. I know that I want that to be about 15mm. Actually, I want it to be exactly 15mm, so I'm going to type in 15 and hit enter. Okay, so that gives me the shape I'm looking for. Now I will want to create a sketch on this plane so that we can go ahead and create the mounting holes like we have here. So let's go back. So I'm going to go to Sketch, Create Sketch, and instead of choosing one of the 3 work planes, I'm going to choose this surface. Now this part of the hook here is kind of blocking my surface that I want to sketch on. So a way to get rid of that geometry, or not get rid of it, but kind of have it, not obstruct it, I'm going to go ahead and click on this slice option here on the sketch palette. And that will remove the top and the bottom and sort of just give me that plane that I selected. So now I can go ahead and start sketching on this. So I'm going to click on the cube here on the right just to orientate it so I'm looking directly at it. And I'm going to start with a couple lines. So I'm going to hit L for a line. And I want to basically break this down so that I have a line going across the middle and a line going across the side, right at the midpoint, so that I have a center mark here. So I'm going to start here. I'm going to hover until I see my triangle referencing the midpoint. So I'm going to go ahead and draw that straight down so that I see my perpendicular constraint. I'm going to do the same thing, find that midpoint and drag across. Okay, now I've evenly split this into 4 quadrants. Now I don't want these to be, these lines to be an actual part of my sketch. I only want them to be sort of guidelines. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on them, and then I can go to Sketch, and I'm sorry, not sketch. I'm going to click on it. I'm going to right click, and I'm going to do normal / construction line, and that will turn it to a dashed line. So now it's no longer part of the sketch, but I can still use it to reference. So I'm going to do the same thing with this, and actually a shortcut to making it a construction line is just click it and hit X. And there we go. So now I'm going to go and select the circle. So I'm going to do sketch, circle, center, diameter, circle. Notice the C. And I'm going to reference that guideline that I made. So I'm going to hover over it till I get that X. And it doesn't really matter where I place it right now. I'm just going to place it anywhere and start click and release and start moving the mouse button out or the mouse wheel out. And I'm going to enter a dimension of 8 millimeters for the diameter and hit enter. Okay, now I want to do the same thing on this bottom half, but instead of redrawing it, I'm going to go ahead and use my mirror command. So I'm going to go to sketch, mirror, and I get this dialog box, and it asks me for two things. What object do I want to mirror, and what's my mirror line? So as my object, I'm going to click on the actual circle. Then I'm going to go back and choose my mirror line and come back and choose this as the mirror line. And as you can see, it gives me a preview showing that it's mirroring that circle about this line. That's exactly what I want, so I'm going to click OK. Alright, now I'm going to hit D for dimension, and I'm going to dimension this line off of I'm going to dimension the center of the circle from this line. I'm going to drag this out, and I want that to be 8 millimeters. Now watch when I hit 8, or I'm going to enter 8. Keep an eye on this circle as well, because once I hit enter, you see that they both move. So because this is a mirror of this, whatever dimension I give this, it'll reference it off of this line as well. So that looks good. That's about exactly what I want. So now I'm going to click Stop Sketch. So now that I have these circles, what I want to do is extrude these in and through, so I can go ahead and use it as mounting holes for my screws. Now the screws that I plan on using are this type of screw, which it has this tapered angle on there, so I want that hole to have that similar effect, so that the screw can easily go in and sort of mount flush with this. So in order to do that, I'm going to go ahead and hit E for extrude, and I'm going to select both these profiles, and I'm going to go in first about 3 millimeters. So let's pay attention to this dialog box. It shows me that I have two profiles selected, and they're both in blue, so I know where they are. And the distance that I want to go in, I'm going to enter -3. So that goes in 3 millimeters. Now, to get that angle, I'm going to click on the taper angle, and I get this little slide. And you can see as I slide it in or out, that angle gets smaller or bigger. So I can set that angle to be a specific number, and in this case I know I want it to be a -35 degrees. So I'm just going to type in -35. The direction, I just want one side, and the operation is going to be cut, and I'm going to click OK. So there we go. I got the angle I'm looking for, and all that's left is just to kind of punch these out the rest of the way. So I'm going to hit E for extrude, select both of these, and just drag this out or into the model, so that it gives me a cut operation, and it reveals that by showing it in sort of a pink color. Again, if I were to bring this back out, I get the cylinder, and this goes to join. But if I bring it back in, it says cut, and it's actually performing a cut. So here's another trick. I'm gonna actually, instead of just going all the way in, for extents, I'm gonna go from distance to all. The nice thing about setting all is that it'll figure out exactly how far it needs to go and cut only to that point. And the nice feature about that is if later I want to come back and say I wanted this to be thicker, it will always cut it all the way through. So, so if I were to, let's say, pull this out and say I want it to be a negative 3.4 millimeters in, and I come back later and make this 5 millimeters thick, well, it's not going to go ahead and give me that hole all the way through that I want. It's only going to go in that 3.4. But by changing it to all, no matter what I change this to, it'll always update so that I have a hole going through. Okay, hope that makes sense. I'm going to click OK, and there we go. So I have my tapered hole and my through hole. So that looks good. The only thing that's left for me to do is apply a few fillets. So in order to do that, I'm going to fillet actually this bottom part and this top part. So I'm going to click F for fillet. And the nice thing about fillet is that I can just keep clicking away. I don't have to hold Control or Command for if I'm using a Mac to keep selecting the different geometries. I just click how many I want and it'll keep updating. And if I selected one too many, for example this by accident, I can just click on it again to deselect it. And you'll always get a count of your selection over here and the number of edges. And I'm just going to sort of drag this in to get the fillet I'm looking for. I think I'm going to be happy with a fillet of 7.5. So I'm going to type that in and hit enter. And I'll do a few more fillets. So I'm going to go ahead and hit F for fillet. And I'm going to fillet these sides over here. And drag this in. Let's make this. I'm going to do 8 again. 8 seems like a good number. Hit enter. And there we go. That actually matches the same one I created earlier here. And we can actually, can be up to you, your preference. But if you want, we can hit F again and create another fillet and do a fillet here on the front. And this I would do a small fillet, maybe a 2 millimeter fillet, and click OK. And so you can see which one you like better, this one or this one. I think I kind of like the one with the fillet. So there you go. That's our 3D printable coat hook. That, as you can see from the picture, it is sort of a very practical design that you can make 3D print and put to use right away. So there you go. Enjoy your new coat hook.